Marky Worthington Podcast all day.
All day.
Dream by night.
Don't buy me a drink. Just give me $10.
All day.
Go down to the strip club with your floppy disk and turn it into a hard drive.
Yeah, right. You'll get fucking thrown out by Big Tony.
We're here to name names and make people feel more ashamed for shit that they're not proud of.
Don't blow it. Keep it simple. Count your money.
Well, whatever it is.
Hello and welcome to the Marky Worthington Comedy Podcast. This is episode 86. Special guest on the show, for those of you following along at home, my old man, Ian Worthington. How you doing?
Yeah, good, Marky. How you going, matey?
Good. I didn't realise this, but the old man's been listening into the podcast over the times that I've put them out, and finally in town while I'm doing a recording, so I figured let's get him on and got as many as the good stories I've got from over the years all around the old man, so may as well hear it from the horse's mouth himself and get him on the show.
Hey, who are you calling the horse, mate?
We'll leave the comedy to me, mate.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is episode 86. We're chatting off mic. Now, I'll mention the age straight up. The old man, 65. Yep. And so has lived through all the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the cool shit. Do you remember what you're doing in 1986? Let's take us back in time.
86. Geez, in 86 I was, a little bit younger than I am now. And 86 I was just married.
Yep.
And we got to move house. I bought a house in a transportable home and I had it moved onto a block of dirt, and I had a friend that said, I got a block of dirt on the outskirts of this little town that I grew up in. I said, how much do you want for the block of dirt? And he said, $2,000. And I thought, okay, well, I can scratch that up. Yeah. So I did that, and then I got a guy from over in the road and over at Parks, and he come along and moved the house for me, and I got a couple of mates to give me a hand, and we set it all up, and I said it worked out really good. And I said we were there for a fair while until you fellas were born.
Yeah, so I was born in 93, and I think we moved out of that place when I was, probably about 97?
97, around 97 we moved.
Yeah.
I started working as a welding instructor and engineer instructor for TAFE.
Yep.
So we had to move around a little bit. So we moved from there to Orange, and I did work over in Orange at TAFE, and I worked as contractor out at the mines doing confined space training and teaching guys how to survive underground.
Yeah, that was a pretty wild time. And it was also it was in that moment where there was getting a lot of attention to that, because it was not long after that period, or within that period, that they had those two Tasmanian miners that were trapped underground, which was all stuff that you were sort of training people how to survive if that happened.
We were doing that. I was basically training guys how to do entry and exit from confined spaces and how to survive in the crushers, because I'd teach guys how to go and replace all the plates in the crushers and how to put down duct boards and how to survive in a 3-story crusher.
Yeah, and
not fall to their death.
And
like back in the time, it was pretty serious stuff, because if you made a blue and somebody made a blue, then you were hauled over the coals for it. So you had to know your stuff back then.
Yeah.
But now that I come to think about it now, I think, geez, some of those records go for 27 years. So. You think, I hope no one falls off the perch in the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, there's people probably still out there active that were trained by people like yourself back then. Hey, call back to the time of 86. You bought a block of land for $2,000. What the fuck? Yeah.
Well, I bought a free Betty transportable home, brand new, for $60,000 with an ensuite, and had veranda front and back and the whole lot. And then it cost me $30,000 to get it all set up, and $2,000, and then it cost me $8,000 to get the sewerage put on and the power put on. So for $100,000 I was set.
Yeah.
Back in them days.
Yeah. And it was like on a 2-acre block, wasn't it?
2 acres of land.
Holy
when
shit.
you fellas were little and that.
Yeah.
we used to, you fellas would go mad because I
Yeah.
built the cubby house for you down the end and the
Yeah.
sand pit.
Yeah,
I remember I used to have to go down every morning and with the old
Cat
raker,
shit out of it.
rake the sand pit to get the cat poo out of it.
Yeah, we had a bloody like a sand pit, but we lived kind of near a bush, so like all of the feral cats and combined with the neighborhood cats would use me sand pit as a communal fucking shitting spot.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was a good yard. Like I remember the old man used to do some work there on bikes and stuff like that in the back shed, doing up motorbikes and that. And you take it for a test ride. I got memories of the old man sitting me on the petrol tank and like between the petrol tank and the handlebars while he was on the sitting down riding, just taking the test rides around the backyard and that.
Yeah.
And that's also the yard I learnt to ride a push bike in because it was a hill. So it's sort of, I remember the old man's pushing me on the back to like to keep me stable. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I could still feel the hand on my back, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still going. And then I turn around, he's bloody like 50 meters up the paddock, and I'm still just pedaling by myself. I'm like, fuck, I just been riding myself. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was a good time. I think.
They were good times. They were
Yeah.
good times when you grew up. Things have changed now a lot. When you two boys have your own kids, things will be a lot different and to what they even are now. And I'm glad that I grew up when I did. See, I was born 12 years after the Second World War ended.
Yeah.
And it was basically all free. It was like the flower power era, you
Yeah,
know. And
yeah.
I grew up in that, hey man, peace man sort of time. And
Yeah.
everyone looks back on it now and thinking, what a weird bunch they were. But, like I remember one of my mates, he turned 60 2 or 3 years before I turned 60. And he was saying, I remember when we were younger, we used to look at the old guys and we'd say, geez, I'd hate to be that old, and they're only in their 60s then. But he said, we're sort of pretty good. And I said, well, we thought about it, and I thought, well, all them guys went through war.
Yeah.
We
Adds
didn't go
years.
for any, that adds years and years to their age, and they seen and did things
Yeah.
no human should have to do.
Yeah.
And they at the end of the war, they just kicked them out and said, okay, you can go about your normal life now.
Yeah.
You know? It's incredible
Yeah.
what they had to endure and what they went through for us.
Yeah.
For us,
Yeah.
And
Did you have older mates that were enlisted? Like being 65 now, I'd say that you were just below the main wave of people that fought in Vietnam.
Yeah, I had. I knew I had a lot of friends that were older than me that were vets that still are.
Still
and
kicking,
I've still got friends that were vets, but I was under the age limit. My eldest brother was called up, but he was a really bad asthmatic. He was really bad with asthma.
Yeah.
And he called up, and then when they were training him, he had a really bad asthma attack, and he almost died. They had to airlift him and put him in an iron lung.
Yeah,
And
right.
then they said to him, no, you're no good to us. So he went off, and he was a truck driver, and all he did was drove trucks.
Yeah.
But, there's probably 10 years between the oldest in our family and the youngest.
Yeah.
There were 7 of us in the
7.
family, and I was the youngest.
Yeah.
The thing is, back in them days, fun was just made, you'd make fun yourself.
Yep.
There was no games. There was nothing to look at. Television didn't come on till 5 in the afternoon. And, there'd be nothing on there to look at anyway.
Good luck till 5 o'clock.
Yeah, from 5 o'clock to about 9 o'clock at night. That was television.
Holy shit.
And then all you heard was the radio. So you heard,
Yeah.
back then we called it the wireless, but I'm
Yeah.
not allowed to call it now. Every time I say the wireless, they look at me funny. So,
Coming to you from the wireless, it's the
Yeah.
Marky Worthington Comedy Podcast.
and we weren't all that rich when we grew up. We were pretty poor. And we'd have second-hand clothes and second-hand toys and all that, but you just made the most of it. You did what you did,
Yeah. I think it was more common then, though. Like, it wasn't... I feel like there's a big class gap at the moment, whereas I feel like from what you've explained to me, like, a lot of people were all in that middle class. Like, it was like a big section of working people.
Yeah, everybody worked. There was not many people that didn't work. The only time you really didn't work is when you retired or you were incapable of working.
Yep.
But everyone had a job doing something because there was that much work out there then.
Sure.
Back then, it'd take 10 guys to do the job one guy will do now.
Yeah.
So everyone sort of had a job. I left school very young. I only spent 6 years at school.
Yeah.
I was an asthmatic as well. It runs in our family, but I seemed to grow out of it. But I had bronchopneumonia when I was 4, 5, 6, really bad, and spent winter in bed. And I was very, very, very puny little guy.
Yeah.
And so I didn't start school until I was 7.
Shit.
And then when I started school, because of the ailments that I had, I was the sort of guy that got picked on a lot.
Yeah.
So then that made me who I was later on in life, When I left, I went to about 4 different schools.
Yeah.
And then I left school when I was 13.
Yep.
So I left school in 1972.
Yep.
And I went straight to work. I worked on back in them days on my old stepfather's farm. So I worked on the farm, and then as soon as I got old enough to have my licence, I went and put myself through TAFE. Back then you could put yourself through TAFE. You didn't have to have an apprenticeship or anything like that. If you wanted to do mechanics or whatever you wanted to do, you'd just go and sign up at TAFE. And back then the money was fairly cheap to go through TAFE. It was all government funded. So, I did automotive engineering and became a mechanic.
Yep.
The only thing you had to do was spend 12 months at the end of it in a garage. So I went and got a job at the panel beaters in the hometown in Grenfell. And I spent 5 years in there panel beating, spray painting, learning the panel beating game. I was very lucky that the old guy that was working in there as well was an old panel beater. Yeah. Not a panel replacer. Right. Because back then was when the Datsuns came out, with the tinny yards. And
so this is like 70...
In 76.
6, yeah.
And you would sort of just replace panels back then.
Sure.
But the older cars, you used to have to panel beat them and fix them, and he showed me how to do all that sort of stuff.
So he learned on like the 50s and 60s style shit.
On the old stuff, the old things where, you'd run over it with a Mack truck and still wouldn't dent it. Those little matchbox toys, you see those where you push them off something, then you crash them and bang them and none of them knock a chip of paint off them. Them old cars from the 40s and 50s were like that,
Yeah. But, it's a bit like one of the first cars we worked on together was a 1957 Morris Minor. It was the first car that we ever were doing a job and seen in the shed and said, I wonder what the owner would offer for that. Yeah. And luckily enough, the job paid for most of it, and then we just had to pay the gap. And so to paint a picture, this is a 1957 Morris Minor. It's like powder blue. Been sitting in the shed for 18 years. The old man organises it to get on the back of a trailer. We take it back to the shed that he had. It wasn't really a shed, it was a hay shed. We chucked it in the hay shed. Drained the fuel tank. The old man changed all the leads for the spark plugs and that because the rats ate all the cables out while it was in the shed. So sitting for 18 years... New wires, new battery, drained the petrol tank and put new fuel in it and started it up. That's how reliable that old school shit was.
We started and drove it, mate. And remember when we were driving, I said, there's some problem underneath this car because it just won't stay on the old track. Yeah. And we went back, and then when we restored that vehicle and put it on the rotisserie and turned it upside down, pulled the springs out, the reason it was taken off the road because they had too much rust in it 18 years previous, and they'd put a panel in the back where this holds the springs in, as you remember when we took it out, and they just pop riveted a bit of tin over the rust and then tried to put the springs back on it. And it was all over the place.
So the story goes, what happened was I ended up sending that down the road, and the bloke that bought it employed the old man to restore it. So not only did it move on to someone else, but also the old man got to restore it too. And from what I understand, old mate still has that restored and it's still rolling. So it then went on to a new owner and he fully restored it back to like original, got extra parts from overseas sent in and replaced, and basically took it all back to brand new original. Here's the funny part. We're talking about how strong the old panels were. Apparently, one of the last things it did before it was taken off the road is the person that owned it before us drove down to Melbourne and hit a Ford Laser, for a 90s Ford Laser, and wrote the Ford Laser off, but didn't even ding the panel on the Mori. It just was like, it was such a little tank that it wrote a car off and then just drove home.
Yeah. All he did was damage the little chrome bumper bar that used to be held on with, like they were on it like spring steel.
Yeah.
So they were designed to hit something and then bounce off them.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it did. It just wrote this car off, and then he just says, "Oh, sorry about that." He drove from Melbourne all the way back up to Maria.
Yeah. What a unit. But that's some car stuff. I wanted also to say, like, so we're painting the timeline's a bit all over the place with this. So we started off at 80s, 70s, and also I just had my 30th birthday. It's part of the reason the old man's in town to catch up. And we figured, hey, let's do a recap. Do you remember what you did for your 30th birthday?
Yeah, for my 30th birthday, I was welding at the time. I was putting myself through an engineering course, and I was doing 9 years engineering and pressure welding, and I spent most of my time at that time studying and that. And for my 30th birthday, I went and bought an engineering business. Went and seen the bank, mortgaged the house. I'd already paid the $100,000 back to the bank by then. And,
see, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So you married in 86 when you were 29.
27, I was actually.
27?
27 got married, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then by the time you were 30, you had a house and just bought your first business.
Yeah, bought an engineering business.
Nice.
I used to get up at 6 in the morning, go to work, and then I'd knock off at 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
To the point where the police used to come down and knock on my door in my workshop and say, "Hey, mate, you better go home. We get people complaining about the noise." And
because you just get stuck on something and want to finish it.
Well, back then, when I first kicked off, I couldn't afford to actually have guys working for me, so I used to have to do all the work myself. So I used to have to try and cram it all in. And sometimes I'd have 4 or 5 jobs there to get out.
Yeah.
So I'd have to do the big hours to get them out to try and get the money in, because I wanted to sort of get the money in so I could pay things.
Yep.
And the thick cop would come down one night at 9:30 and he goes, "Oh, I've got people whinging about the noise." And I'd say, "Well, I try not to make too much noise at night. I don't pick up the sledgehammer at night." I basically set up and only weld and grind at night. Yeah. But anyway, so I used to have to knock off then at like 7 at night and go home.
Yeah.
And your mum at the time, she was working at the hospital, so she used to do a lot of work late too. She used to work at late hours.
Yeah.
And so we were both sort of working, but then it paid off. We ended up pretty well in front with everything there. And then we, as I was saying, after I got my engineering certificates and got my pressure welding tickets and I sort of went on then. I got actually offered a job by TAFE to teach welding and engineering because I'd spent that much time doing it. Yep. That I did. So I went and did a certificate 4 in teaching. And after I did that, I started teaching welding at TAFE. I started off on the nighttime welders. They were just all the basic welding techniques and that. And then they were the guys who'd come after work. And we used to have a good time doing that. And then I got promoted then to teaching the trade. And then I used to do the year 1, 2 trade. And then I ended up doing the fitter welders and the year 3 tradies. And then I got promoted to teach pressure vessel welding. Yep. So I ended up with 7 out of the 10 tickets myself. So I could teach a variant of those. And it was good. Did that for 8.5 years. And then we got sick of that. Well, we didn't get sick of it, but you guys, we were in Orange and you guys were getting a bit older. And I thought, I don't want you fellas to sort of just grow up in the grind. Yeah. So, look, back then when they had a thing called the Trading Post, you didn't look on Facebook for a marketplace then. You had to go and buy a magazine and look for it.
Yeah.
And looked in there and found an old camper van that needed restoring. Yeah. So I said, well, if I restore this camper van, then we can go for a bit of holiday. So,
that's right. That was our ticket out of there.
Yeah. So I had an old 86 Pajero short wheelbase Sports that I bought cheap and restored it up And then we went and bought this old camper, pop-top camper.
Yep.
She had a double bed at the front and a double bed at the back and a little kitchen and that in it, but the guy hadn't used it for a long time. And I picked it up off him for $350. And I had a friend at Orange that was a canvas replace. He used to do sales and do canvas work, and I asked him what it would cost to fix it. And he said, if you pull it all to bits, he said, and I do it and you put it all together, he said, about $1,800. And I said, yeah, fair enough. So I done that. And while he was making that, I went through and done the axles and springs and did new wiring, new
It's
tail
about
lights.
2004.
Yeah. So we ended up, the thing cost $2,500 on the road.
Yeah.
And then handed me a resignation in at TAFE, and I said, righto, boys, take you out of school. We're going to do the homeschooling now. And we went
We became gypsies for a second.
Yeah,
there.
we did.
Yeah.
We went round through Victoria. We went to Tassie. We spent like 7 or 8 months just driving around Tasmania.
Yep.
And just looking at everything. And we'd do the homeschool thing in the morning, and then we'd get that over and done with and go for a bit of a thing. And I had all my welding gear with me, and I'd just go into engineering places and say, here's my certificate, here's my ticket, my welding ticket.
Yeah.
I said, here's, I can contract to you.
Yep.
I'll give you an invoice at the end of the week if you want me. And I said, I went to work my way around Tassie, basically.
Yeah.
And then it was finished. We came back and moved to Maria.
Yeah.
And that's
Ended
where
up South Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where you finished your schooling off. And that was a great little place, Maria.
It was probably the best spot to do high school. So all through primary school, we moved quite a bit. Just with you teaching at TAFE, a lot of hours, a lot of travel, certain towns were closer to wherever you're going to be. So, it was just easier sometimes to move to bigger areas and all that sort of stuff. So my primary school was a little bit mixed, but one advantage of Maria was I stayed in the same school from when I started high school to when I finished. So I had that core group of mates that got me through the thing. And I think part of why I'm pretty quick to sort of chat to people and get to know someone from the get-go is because I spent so many of my early years starting at new schools having to make friends quickly to fit in. So I think a lot of my personality is attributed to that. So it's good. I think it was a good rounded experience, get to do a bit of traveling, a little bit of making new friends, seeing new places. I mean, there's people that I went to school with in Grenfell that are still there. And they didn't get to experience all that. And they're content with that, and that's fine. But I'm glad that we sort of got a bit more variety.
I think it made you well-rounded in life to move around. And the other thing was that every time we moved to a place, I would try and rent a place that was no further away than about half a K from the school.
Yeah.
So that there was no long-distance travelling. When I was a younger guy, we used to have to travel. I used to catch the bus at 10 to 7 in the morning to get to school at 10 to 9.
Yeah.
We'd get on the bus at 20 to 4 in the afternoon. I wouldn't get home until almost 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So basically all your homework and everything you did on the bus.
Yeah.
And that because...
Didn't have time.
That's what you do, That's what you do. And I always swore that when I had boys or when I had children...
Yeah.
that we would live close to a school because the travel time is something that I hated. I hated that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the travel times, even now, the advantage of Canberra is everything's less than half an hour away. Even the furthest distance to Southside is usually about half an hour. I mean, on a bad day, sometimes it can hit 45, but peak hour's never an hour. Everybody's home pretty quick, which is good. But yeah, we got that. Something else. Oh, and also, so we did a bit of traveling, but there was some times there before we got the caravan where we went camping instead. So just to sort of get us used to the outdoor lifestyle and to get away from the hustle and bustle. While we're living in Orange, there was a small mining village from way back when the gold rush days happened called Ophir. And there was a creek bed that had been panned to shit. There was some old open cut old caves there and stuff that had been dug for mining. And yeah, just a whole bunch of like cool little sightseeing spots there. And it was my first experience with a long drop toilet. Just in case I've got it a little bit fucked up in my memories, if we can recount the experience from the outside.
I'll tell you how it goes. Marky, he was only a little fella, and he was, he wasn't all that little. He was
about eight
or nine. And he says, Dad, he said, I need to have a crap. And I said, well, there's a toilet over there, mate. And he goes, oh, geez, you know. And I said, well, I'll go over with you. I said, it's a long drop. I'll just check it out. So I kicked the door open, have a bit of look in there. There's no redback spiders in there or anything like that. And no snakes in there, you know. I said, no, all the critters are gone. I said, you'll be right. So away you go. So anyway, there was a few other people camping around the area at the time and that. And Mark goes in and shuts the door. He's in there for a little while, not very long. And I can hear him going, anyway, I said, you're right in there, Mark. Anyway, he opens the door, he comes back out and he says, oh, Dad, I can't go in there. He said, it stinks. And he said, I'm going to throw up. And I said, well, just hold your nose, mate. I said, you'll be right. I said, it's not going to last that long. I said, just duck in, I'll shut the door, hold your nose. You'll be right.
You need to remember at this point, younger brother Lukey needs to go too, so he's standing next to Dad waiting for me to finish. So we got Dad and Luke both waiting out the front.
Yeah, they're waiting anyway. Marky's in there and he does his business, you know. Anyway, he comes out and there's blood coming out his nose and it's on his hands and that. And I said, mate, what happened? He said, I held my nose that hard, Dad, it started bleeding.
And just to look down and see Luke's face where he's like, Luke nearly was ready to wait till we got back home after that.
Luke said, she'll be right, Dad. I'll hang on to it.
The old long drop. But yeah. Oh, I have a caveat here because I'm the only person that's contactable through the methods of this podcast. Don't hit me up for your fucking welding jobs because you know me old man can fix whatever's fucked at your house. I know that he can weld everything, but it's not my fucking job to be a business manager and give you the old piece of cast iron fucking pot that the handle fell off 12 years ago and you haven't got the balls to throw it out yet. Chuck it in the tip and get a new one, you stingy fucks.
I'll get a few of those.
Yeah. I just figured I may as well chuck that out there.
Mate, yeah, the amount of crap that someone could buy for $30,
yeah.
And they'll come and give me they say, can you fix that? And I'll say, well, mate, you know, it's going to cost you like $40 or $50 to fix it.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, well, I'll get you to do it. So you do it and give it back to them. They see you a month later and go, oh, you know that thing you fixed? And go, yeah, I could have bought a new one for half that. And I said, well, why didn't you go and price one first?
Yeah.
know? I'm not here to advise you. I'm just here to do the job.
Yeah, true. Yeah. The advantage is if you do, see, the problem is a lot of people don't do good work, whereas people know with your work, something that you fixed is probably better than a new one. Because if it's already broken and you fixed it, it's probably not going to break again because you fix it in a way that's not going to break it. Like it's like an engineer's mind, which is good.
Yeah, because I did the engineering and that, you look at something and go, how can I modify this to make it a lot better than it is?
Stronger and shit.
When I got my bodybuilder's ticket and that, and I was doing aluminium tippers and stuff, you know, they'd get put off the road and the RTA would say, no, that's got a crack in there, you know, you've got to get that done. Well, I was ticketed to do all that. I'd do that and then it'd have to go through inspection again and get inspected. So it sort of trained you up, you're trained up to do that sort of work, and that training also is good stead for when you do smaller jobs too, because you look at it with the same eye, you know. You don't just think, oh, it's only a handle off a pot, I'll just tack a bit of weld on it. You think, okay, it's got to support it for the duration. Yeah,
true. And also you sort of have pride in your work, which is something that sometimes is lost these days.
Well, that's the thing, you know, like, word of mouth gets around farther. I never advertised.
Yeah.
And I've been welding now for 45 years.
Yeah.
And I've never advertised the whole time I've been, and I've always been flat out welding. Even where we've moved to now, my partner has bought a pub in a little town that's only got 38 people in it.
Yeah.
You know, and I went out the other day with my gear, mobile gear, and welded the pipe back in a 40-foot water tanker that's aluminium.
Yeah.
And the guy said, I couldn't get anyone else to do this.
Yeah.
This side of getting a permit and driving it an hour to get it done, I just couldn't get anyone to do it.
Yeah.
And I only done that last week. And now my partner was saying that she has had about 5 inquiries at the pub.
Yeah.
Oh, is
Can you do
Ian,
this?
Ian is he? Can he do a job next week? You know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I said, no, I'm trying to get away from it now. I'm in my mid-60s now.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I'm still fit and healthy, but I just
It's time as well. Like you get to the point where you get to pick and choose what jobs you want to do and whether you want to spend time doing one thing or the other. You know, so it all boils down to that. Now, in our time warp episode, what have we covered? We've covered bloody everything from the 50s right through to now. There's a time I want to cover off. I mean, let's say that the what's it called, the statute of limitations has worn off it. I remember hearing stories about, you know, motorbikes over the years getting faster and better and all that sort of stuff. And I think that your generation was probably the first to experience like when motorbikes really started to like get more power. Tell us about the first time you ever like were riding along.
yeah. Well,
It was like just there's so many stories, but I just want to boil it down to start it off. The first time you've ever opened up the throttle and felt the actual power of a motorbike and how that felt.
Yeah, well, back in the 70s, when the 900 Kawasaki's first came on the market, I was 74. I bought a Z1B 900, and it was pretty quick. Back then, the old 750 Honda was the bike to have. The police all had 750 Hondas and that.
Yep.
And then they bought the 900 Kawasaki's out. My mate up the road, his brother was a highway patrol policeman, and he had a 750. And when I turned up on this 900, he was up for a bit of a break, seeing his mum and dad and that. And he said, oh, can I take your bike for a ride? And I said, yeah, mate. I said, you're a bloody patrol copper. You should be able to handle a bike.
Yeah.
He took it for a run. He was gone for about 5 minutes. He came back and he got off and he said, man, he said, I hope we don't have to come up against these on our bikes, because he said, we won't even blow wind up their exhaust pipes. You know? And it wasn't long after that they were all issued with 900s.
Oh, right.
Yeah, after that, probably 6-7 months after that, they took the 750s off them and gave them 900s.
Yep.
Now I think they have 1300 Yamahas now or something like that.
Like that.
But anyway, no, they were good bikes. I wore 3 of them out because that's all I did was ride bikes. I used to race enduro bikes as a sideline.
Yeah.
So I used to build enduro bike. I'd buy a bike, strip it down, rebuild it to the specs I'd want, and then I'd race it on the weekends, enduro race it.
Yep.
And then that put me in good stead for road riding, because I used to just ride a road bike like you'd ride a trail bike.
Yeah.
And 900s were a great bike. They were a great bike. They didn't handle all that well, but the last one I had, because I could, pull things apart and put them together, I was always curious. So I shortened the swinging arm by 1 inch, and I put some bracing in the cradle frame and braced it, and I put a cross brace under the seat, and I braced up in the triple trees up in there, put it all back together again, and put an adjustable steering damper on it. That made it handle heaps better. It used to handle heaps better, and they didn't get the death wobbles at 140 k's and round corners and that. You'd be half into a corner. I know a mate of mine said to me, you're talking about different brands of bikes, and a mate of mine, we were talking about bikes, and he said about the fast bikes. He said, and he said, you guys, you hook into a corner at bloody 200 kilometres an hour. And he said, I know how it is. He said, you fly into the corner, and he said, you lay down, and he said, you're laying down. And he said, and the bike's death wobbling. And he said, you sort of, your eyes get as big as dinner plates. And he said, then you just come out the other side of the corner and you stand the bike up. And he said, you've got about 50 mil to the edge of the tar. He said, I know how it is. He said, I ride a Harley Davidson. He said, that happens to me at 80 k's.
Far out. Yeah. That's so It would have been unheard, like, because when you think of it, like 70s, I think a lot of people, like, there was a lot of power in cars, but not a lot of handling.
Yeah.
And the power to weight would have been a lot different from a bike. So I feel like it would have been the first time that people that wanted to go fast actually chose the bike option.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, you could buy a GDHO Phase 3 Falcon for about $6,500.
Yeah.
You go down Parramatta Road and they'd be everywhere.
Yeah.
You'd bring one up. I had mates that had GDHO Falcons, you know, and you'd just put the 900 up against them in a straight line, and it'd be like they were in a push bike.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? And the equivalent would be like, just to put something on it, it'd be like owning one of them bikes back then was like having a car with 4,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
You know, that was the ratio, roughly the ratio of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But then when, sort of like after the 900 went, I had a Z1000.
Yep.
And it was all right too, but they started detuning them a bit then to the original ones. You had to put smaller carbies on them, and they played around with them, and they broke better and they handled a little bit better, but they didn't quite have the power. Then I bought an 1100 GSX Suzuki in 1982. Mm-hmm. That's when they were winning the Castrol 6 Hour and all that, so I thought, I'll buy one of these. So anyway, I went down to City Suzuki and I bought one in the case. It was straight out of the thing. He said, how do you want it? And so I just want one that's not assembled. So he said, yeah, okay. He said, it'll be $3,000 back then. So I bought one and I took it straight over to another place that I had a mate working at. And we just took it out of the case, stripped the motor straight down. We put what they call a Yoshimura kit in it. And we put a Yoshimura race kit straight in the bike. It's brand new.
Yeah.
And that bike was just incredible. Back in 1982, that would pull, well, now you can buy them off the showroom floor that do, incredible speeds.
Yeah.
But back in 1982, that bike had pulled 285, almost 290 Ks an hour.
Yeah, that's
wild. And it would get from 0 to 160 Ks in about like 3 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? And it would get to the point where there's a couple of spots where you could actually wind the thing out, a couple of quiet roads where they were dual lane roads.
Yep.
And it's just amazing that you get going on them and you wind them out, and it's like after you get to a certain speed, it's like you're in a different world. It's like you've got tunnel vision. Everything seems to look different.
Yeah.
And
like hyperspace in Star Wars.
It is. It's mad. And like, I don't have a bike. I still have trail bikes now, but I don't have a road bike now.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a couple of friends, and they said, when are you going to buy another bike? Because a lot of my old mates that rode when I rode have gone riding again.
Yeah, still riding, yeah.
They ride. We had a poker run there last month at the little pub that we got. We had a poker run there, and there was 300 bikes turned up for that. So we had 300 bikes for the 2 or 3 hours that they were there. And most of the guys, I knew a lot of the guys, and they were all saying, when are you going to buy another bike? But see, if I bought a bike now, it wouldn't be for the adrenaline rush and the speed. It'd just be for the fun of going for a ride, just for the cruise.
Feel the wind on your knees,
yeah,
as they say.
It's all about just sort of going, checking the destinations out, going for a ride now. But they were great times, loved it.
Yeah, no, that's good. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll get into story time. Come on, grab your friends. We're all...
Already forgot this one.
Okay. The fun will never end. It's...
Story time.
There we go. Okay, that's the track for story time. You know what that means? It is time for story time. This episode's been mostly stories, but... we just wanted to highlight 2 good ones that contrasted the rest of the episode. Now, we spoke about camping before, and it jogged up 2 great memories of camping. So they were 2 different times, but all at that Ophir place that I was talking about. So I remember we had a few days where we'd go out metal detecting. Like I said, it was an old mining place, so we're like, maybe we could find the nugget we can all retire, like I'll never have to work. I'm 8 years old and I'll never need to do anything ever again. In this place that had been trudged by miners for fucking years, all hoping to do the same thing. But one thing they didn't have that we had was a metal detector. See, in the gold rush era, they didn't have that shit. So we all were holding on to this idea that we were going to find some gold that no one had ever found before. Our adventure led us down a open mine shaft,
into the side of a hill.
In the side of a hill. It wasn't open, sorry, it was a cut in. Because these guys that originally like mined this place were literally with like a pick and chisel just hammering into like shale rock and just quartz and all these like different like Aussie bush rock types, hard surfaces, and just chipping away at it. So we go down there, we're thinking, oh yeah, we're like, oh, I bet they didn't try the walls. We got the metal detector on the walls, we're all going down there, you know, getting further and further. But we can. I remember there was like there was something dead in there. Like I found like a dead possum. We're like, oh, we're starting to veer off the beaten track now. You know, it's getting darker and darker. We've got those old torches, you know, you get from the petrol station, dolphin torch, we're all flashing them around and that sort of stuff. And mind you, remember, I'm 8 or 9 years old. Luke is 14 months younger than me, and we're just cruising down there, and we think we're on to the big fucking find, you know. Something's going to come up. We get further down there, further and further. Now, we can see tree roots. I remember there was like tree roots hanging from like the roof. Like it was places where we're like, no one surely has gone in this deep before. Like we might stumble on something here that like no one's ever discovered. Maybe the last person that was down this far was probably a miner from back in the gold rush times. Like there was little rock pools and stuff on the ground where the water had been seeping through, and there's moss growing on the walls and everything like that. Now, we're finally faced with a Y intersection or a T intersection, right? And it's all getting a bit dark and hairy. Now, I'm going to hand it over to the old man. I'm going to see if he can describe accurately how the rest of the journey went.
Yeah, well, what happened was we were going into the hill, and these miners used to chisel their way through rock and that, and it's incredible how they used to do it. The sheer gold fever would make them keep going and going. They'd pick up little bits and pieces here and there. But we were way into the guts of this hill. And we got to this T intersection, and we thought, well, we'll go up the T side because that'll go further into the hill. And it was fairly safe. Even though I took the boys down there, I didn't sort of go anywhere where I thought that was going to have a cave in or anything, because it's basically solid rock.
Yeah.
And we wandered up this other little side track. It was dark and it was wet, and the kids had the metal detector going, and I'm sort of following along with the old dolphin torch and that. And we sort of got to a spot where we thought, geez, we're almost coming to the end of this, and it sort of opened up into a little bit of a cavern there. And we thought, geez, there's got to be something here. There's got to be something, And then the kids are waving this metal detector around like you'd wave a flag around at the car races, Anyway, we're the only ones that have ever been in here. There's nobody ever been in here before. There's no one yet. So anyway, when we get there, we heard this noise, and we thought, oh, geez, what's that? So we thought it might be an animal. So I said to the boys, I'll go in front. You boys stay behind me. I'll get the torch. I'll go in front, and we'll check it out. So when we got to this little bit where it opened up, lo and behold, here's old mate that I'd never seen before with long hair and bloody that, and he's sitting there in the dark smoking a bong. And he looks up and he goes, huh? And we go, sorry, mate. Yeah. And we turned around and wandered back out again. And I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah. Also in one of our camping adventures, so we decided one weekend we might go away, but I think it was sort of edging towards winter. Like it might have been like sort of starting to cool off. It was one of those hit or miss sort of weekends where it's like, oh, it might be all right. Might just need to rug up, that sort of thing. Remember, it was cold. We just got an eight-man tent, which basically boils down to maybe about 3 people if you're lucky. But it was good though, because Lukey and I were young. We just stay on one side of the tent, and the old man used to stay in the other. There was like a little hallway in the middle, and we were separated on either side. You put all your shoes and stuff in put all your shoes and stuff in the middle. And we're there, it's cold, we're hunkered down. And Luke and I are laying in one side of the tent, and it's dead quiet. But the old man's snoring down the other end. And I just hear him snoring. So he's snoring away. But then we hear, geez, the old man's really getting into the snoring, isn't it? What happened?
Yeah, well, the boys told me in the morning what was going on, but, I'm laying there, and when I snore at night, when I first go to sleep, I snore heaps, and then I sort of settle down. But when I snore, it's sort of a sound, and the boys could hear that. And anyway, the next morning, this is what they told me.
Yeah. The next morning, we realised Dad's snoring had attracted a buck possum down out of the tree that was on the other side of the tent that thought there was another buck in there that was trying to take his territory. So between Dad snoring, there's a buck on the other side making growling noises back, thinking that he was here competing for the territory. So it wasn't just the old man snoring. There was a big buck possum on the other side that was hammering back at him.
Yeah, I'm going... And the boys said there's this thing on the other side when they worked it out, and he's going... And then he said, and then the old man's going... And they said this went on for about 2 hours.
So we woke up in the morning and said, we're all buggered, let's just go home, fuck it. But finally, I close on the story the old man told me about. Was time in engineering and all that sort of stuff. You run across some characters, people want to show you their projects that they made and all that sort of stuff. They know that you do a bit of engineering and welding and crafting and all that sort of stuff. So I remember when we were younger, the old man was telling us about some fella that had made something himself. He brought it down to show the old man.
Yeah, we had we used to get the schoolies that come in every year. You'd have them for a week, and the guys that were interested in doing a bit of engineering or welding, you'd take them on for a week and just have them in the workshop and show them different stuff. And one of the young guys I had, he said, "Oh, I made a cannon." And I said, "You did?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I'll bring it down tomorrow and show it to you." And I go, "Yeah, okay." And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm thinking of a cannon, But anyway, he brings this little miniature thing down. It's probably around about 150 mil long, and it's about probably 12 or 14 mil thick, 15 mil. And he's done a pretty good job. It looked pretty good. He's drilled it out. He's put it in the lathe at school, and he's lathed it out, and he's drilled the centre of it out, and he's made a little set of wheels for it and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, good ornament. And anyway, he goes, "Oh, it works." And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I'll show you." And I go, "Yeah, righto." So I said, "You sure it's all right?" And he goes, Yeah. He said, I've done it before. So I said, "Yeah, okay." So anyway, he goes to his bag and he comes out and he's got a little bit of gunpowder that he's got off his old man when old man was reloading ammunition. So he's got the gunpowder and he's poured it down the barrel, and then he's got a 6-inch nail and he's got a piece of cotton wool, and he's banged that down behind it with a nail. And he's got this little ball bearing, and he's put that in there, and he's banged that down. And but at this stage, I'm sort of backing out of the shed, and I'm sort of getting around the corner of the post. And I said to him, "You right, mate?" And he goes, Yeah, no, it's all good." "Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, he gets there, and he puts a little bit of gunpowder on top of the barrel that goes down to a little hole that's supposed to make it go bang. Anyway, at this stage, I'm sort of right round the corner of the shed, and I've only got one eye sort of looking at what's going on. I've got the other hand up near my face just to protect it, And I'm probably 25 metres away. This guy's standing over the thing. So anyway, he gets his hands into his pocket, and he gets a box of matches out, and he lights the match. He holds it down near the thing, and it goes bang! Thing flies up in the air about, I don't know, it goes up about 1.5 feet off the ground. I don't know where the ball bearing went. I sort of see it all, and I walk back in again, and I go, right, and he looks up at me, and he's got this gunpowder and shit all over his face, and it's like he's got blackheads, and there's bits of speckledy shit in his fucking face, and bits of little spots of blood and stuff like that, and he's wiping his eyes, and I go, "Bloody hell, mate, are you all right?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "That's what happened last time I tried it." And I said, "Well, you better pack it away, mate, and don't try it again. Just put it in your room as an ornament, mate."
Next thing you'll be fucking kicking off Anzac Day. Oh, fuck. Well, that's our final story for the episode. That's been episode 86. And yeah, thanks to Heaps for being on the show, Dad. I like hearing some of the stories, and I hope everyone out there likes hearing some of them straight from you themselves.
No, it's been great, mate. It's been great to come down, break what I do every day, and come down and see you. And yeah, no, it's good stuff. And hopefully that we'll do many more of them over the years.
Yeah, it's a good little stamp in time. So yeah, there you go. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Marky Comedy, and also check out my website, markycomedy.com. Until next time, cheers. Don't buy me a drink. Just name names.
Yeah, right. Big Tony. You'll get fucking thrown out of the strip club with your floppy disk.
all day.
Make people feel ashamed for shit all day.
Don't blow
Turn
it.
it into a hard drive.
Yeah, right. We're here
Keep it simple. Count your money.
that they're not proud of.
Just give me $10.
All right.